Started, Raphael?
Yep, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all had a good lunch. So I'm Raphael Simon. I'm an architect at RightScale, and I'm here with my colleague Ryan O'Leary. I'm a product manager at RightScale, and we are here to talk to you about Chef and the whys and hows of using Chef in RightScale. Now, this is not Chef. This is the product I was working on as my first job after college. It's called i4 Studio, and it's an IDE for the i4 programming language. And i4 is an object-oriented language that came up before Java, and that was very elegant. It was all about encapsulation, having contracts on all your methods, being able to reuse code, share that code, and be able to represent the code graphically and work on the graphics and get back to the code. So very nice and elegant design. And so for 9 years, I worked on trying to produce a tool that allowed people to write good code, elegant code. And 4 years ago, I joined RightScale and got to face the harsh reality of writing code that configures servers. And elegance is not necessarily the forefront of that type of programming. It's more about making stuff work. Things being beautiful, that's nice, but things have to work. And they have to work repeatedly, and they have to work under very different conditions, which makes it hard to write code that actually is modular and reusable. And so I always had in mind that there had to be a better solution, that there had to be a better way to write code that configures servers than just having to put together those lines of bash scripts, Perl and Oak, and just wish for the best. And as it turns out, there is. So about 3 years ago, we did our first integration of Chef in the RightScale platform. And at the time, you had to be kind of a very advanced user wanting to use the cutting-edge technology to really use that, but it worked, and you were able to use Chef within RightScale. And about a year ago, we went one step further. We released our server templates based on Chef. So we actually started kind of eating our own dog food and producing server templates that were using Chef. And the reason for that will be explained in more details by Ryan in a moment. And finally, next week, we're going to release a new server template, which is a Chef client server template, which allows you to run servers that are configured by Chef versus by RightScale. So you can actually will be able to launch servers that will be configured by your Chef infrastructure if you have one, and not use the kind of native RightScale configuration system. And I will go into more details in a few slides. So basically what we're doing is that integration is evolving, and what we're trying to do is make it possible for you to use our platform the way you really want. And whether you want to use our implementation of Chef or the native Chef or another configuration engine, that's fine. You should be able to leverage the other features that RightScale provides. So on that note, I'm going to let Ryan take over the next slides and explain why we decided to use Chef to produce our 12H1 release of server templates.
Thank you. So at RightScale, we have a server template team whose job it is to produce all the server templates that we publish on a fairly regular basis. A year ago, this was kind of the situation they were in. They had 16 server templates that they were working on. Everything from application servers, database managers, load balancers, basically everything that you would run your application on, these guys were producing server templates for and trying to build reference architectures around. At the time, we were using our RightScript technology, which is bash scripting basically. And we had over 75 scripts that these guys were maintaining for all of these different servers. That was getting to be a bit burdensome. So if you were actually look at all of those scripts, it was thousands of lines of bash code. Because we were supporting multiple operating systems, there were a lot of conditional statements in there. If I'm on Ubuntu, then this file is over here. If I'm on CentOS, then this service is called this other thing. And they had to build all those conditionals into these scripts. They also had to build in idempotency into the script. So you can't go create a directory if it already exists. You're going to get an error. So you have to check if the directory exists and then go create the directory if it doesn't exist. So they had to build all this into the scripts, and it was becoming really onerous, especially as we were looking at the future, this was a couple of years ago, we were having more clouds come onto the platform, and we wanted to be able to support more operating systems. And we knew immediately that this was just not going to scale well. This wasn't going to work. So we chose to change what the server template development team did and move it all to Chef, primarily for these reasons. And these reasons came directly from the developers themselves and our technical leads. Number one, idempotency is built into Chef in the Chef language for all kinds of constructs, for files, for packages, for resources. You just tell Chef what you want it to be, and Chef makes sure it is that way. For example, to install a package, you just tell Chef, hey, I want this package to be installed. Chef figures out whether or not that package is already there and needs to not be installed because it already exists, or if it's not there and needs to be installed. It does the same thing with files, with directories. It's all built into the platform. The things that aren't built into the platform that you might need to do to ensure idempotency are also really easy to implement in Chef using the only if and not if constructs. You can put whatever block of code you need to, and using those constructs, you can put in very simple conditionals that ensure idempotency for your scripts. The second thing that we really value about Chef is the way that it abstracts system resources and utilities around that. So again, before we used to have to check which system are we on, what operating system are we on. Chef gets rid of a lot of that for us. You don't have to do platform-specific things in a lot of cases. It's built in. There's also resource notifications options, so you can do things like configure it so that when a config file changes, the service restarts automatically, and you don't have to go back and your scripts have to worry about that. Another nice thing about Chef was a built-in availability of system configuration information. So using OHI, all of this information that the system knows about itself is available to you in your Chef code. IP addresses, DNS names, kernel versions, operating systems, all of that stuff is available to you in your code by default with Chef. It comes with it. And then lastly, a very strong open source community. So Chef conference is actually going on right now, down the street basically. They are blowing up. They have all kinds of people participating in their community, all kinds of open source cookbooks that are out there for you to help build up your applications. Help is available via their forums and chats and things. So it's a really strong community around Chef, and that was an important part of that decision as well. So we changed. So we moved everything to Chef. Last year, as Raphael mentioned, we published our whole suite of server templates, all based on Chef. We have a couple of RightScript ones in there for people that don't want to use Chef at all, but mostly using Chef, all the complexities in Chef. And it really changed how we were able to produce these server templates at RightScale. So a couple years ago when we were doing the RightScript-based server templates, we had a total of 16 server templates. If you look across the board at how often they were released about every 6 months. So about 2 times a year, all these server templates would get refreshed. And every time that we released these, we ran a suite of tests that consists of about 50 tests to test out basic functionality. Fast forward to today, we have the next release is coming up, v13.4. It'll be in about a month or two. And it's a totally different picture. These server templates, now we have 23 of them instead of 16, so we have more of them. We release them on a 2 to 3 month cycle, so much more frequent releases. And every release, including during the development, we run over 2,500 automated tests on those servers. So you can see the scale that Chef enabled us to achieve by moving from scripts to Chef. Over a 5 times increase in bandwidth of what our development team was able to produce. And again, these guys are developing server templates that mirror what you guys should be doing too with your applications and how you need to configure them. It's the same kind of stuff. So if you are using Chef, you know that Chef is very powerful. You can use it to configure your servers and download everything and get it all running just the way you want it. A lot of times the question is, well, what do I need RightScale for then? All my servers can configure themselves now with Chef, and I don't need RightScale to do the configuration management. It boils down really to 2 things. One is that RightScale provides a single pane of glass for your application throughout its entire lifecycle. Chef is really good at making sure that a server looks like you want it to look like and that things are there where you want them. It's not as powerful at taking operational tasks on actually doing activities on those servers, performing backups and things like that. It's not as good at that. You can do that, but it's not really what wasn't built for that. RightScale manages your application throughout its entire lifecycle, including all the way through decommissioning. And then the other thing you know is if you run in the cloud is that you need a lot of other utilities if you're going to run in the cloud. You need to have monitoring. And based on those monitors, you want to be alerted when certain things happen. So there are all these peripheral tools that you need to implement on your cloud application. And RightScale provides a ton of those for free, well, with your RightScale account. So it's all part of the platform. It's all done through a single pane of glass, a single API, and you get a bunch of those tools. You don't have to worry about integrating this tool or that tool, and they've got this API, I don't want to do that to my ticketing system. It's all built into the platform. So it really boils down to that, and we'll walk through some of this in detail. And for those of you that were in the Puppet talk earlier, you're going to see some of the same stuff here, and there's a reason for that. It's the value of RightScale is pretty similar on top of Chef or Puppet, no matter which configuration management system you use. So you'll see some of the same stuff, but then Raphael will take you down some new paths. So what are these things that RightScale provides that you don't get by default with other technologies? One is application automation. So you're able to monitor your system resources across all your deployments. You can set up custom monitors, custom graphs. You can create dashboards, all the things that you need to do to monitor your application. It's all part of RightScale. You can also then configure alerts on those and configure notifications through our alerting system or another alerting system. You can scale on any cloud. So some clouds obviously have auto-scaling built in, others do not. We have an auto-scaling solution that works across clouds. You can integrate your systems with your cloud using our API. So if you have systems that you want to be integrated in cloud, a lot of people have ticketing systems or workflow systems that they want to have tied into their cloud, maybe build and development systems. You have one API you write to, no matter which cloud, which service you're using, you can write to one API, the RightScale API, and all that's available, including all of those utilities, all the monitoring and alerting that's all available through the API as well. You don't have to write to multiple APIs, different languages, different constructs. It's one API. And then you can orchestrate all kinds of activities across deployments and across servers using a product that's new. It's in private beta right now called CloudFlow. It's an orchestration engine that allows you to automate tasks across your entire application. So for example, let's say you needed to do a code refresh. You want to shut down or detach 5 servers at a time from a load balancer, update the code, then reattach them. You can do that with CloudFlow in a very logical way, in a very efficient way. So that's one reason. Another reason, another value that RightScale provides on top of Chef is organization of your deployment. So you're running tens, dozens, hundreds of servers. You need ways to organize these things. We provide deployments that let you do that. You can set up deployments based on your workflows and what makes sense for your organization. Some people set up deployments per application, some per unit. Some people have production and QA and dev. Some people have all their databases in one, all their application servers in another. It's really depending on you and how you want your workflow to look, how you want it to look. You can set up these deployments, and they let you put in custom settings, monitoring, and alerts per deployment. So you can have deployments all ready to go and just spin up servers depending on how you want them to behave in the cloud. User and permissions management is also something we provide. So you have multiple users with role-based access control to all kinds of resources in the RightScale platform. We have SSO available, so you can integrate that with your current authentication mechanisms. We provide managed SSH on all instances, so any instance launched in RightScale has keys laid down for RightScale users, and when they log in, they will be logged in as themselves and be able to log in directly to the instances. And coming soon, we'll be integrating with IAM and also have a native to RightScale granular permission model, so that in RightScale you can set granular permissions for whichever cloud that you're running on. And then the last value proposition I want to talk about here is cost forecasting and detailed reporting. So you heard earlier about Plan for Cloud, a RightScale product that allows you to see where you're going with your cloud costs. You can forecast out based on historical data and based on estimated future usage of different services. You can compare different services and different options for you. If you want to know whether it be cheaper to run one extra large server or 3 mediums, you can put that in the tool and see what the eventual cost will be. You can plan out certain peaks that you expect to happen in load or growth over time. It really gives you a good tool to plan your future costs in cloud, which is something that people find is something that's not easy to do right now. And then based on what you've actually done, you can run detailed reports on a regular basis on any kind of dimension that you want. So if you want to see by deployment, by cloud, you can see all these things with detailed reports. You can take these reports and export them out to whatever accounting system you use or whatever Excel, whatever you need to ingest these reports to bring them into your system. So that's a little bit about why we chose Chef and the value that we got from it, and about what value RightScale provides on top of Chef. So no matter whether you're a Chef user now looking at RightScale or whether you're a RightScale user considering using Chef, there are different ways to approach that. So I'm going to hand it back to Raphael, and he's going to take you through the detailed solutions there no matter which of those camps you're in.
Thank you, Ryan. Right, so really the question is it RightScale plus Chef or Chef plus RightScale? And today there's really kind of those two modes you can use RightScale in. If you're a RightScale user and you want to get the same advantage we got from using Chef by developing our server templates, then you can use our built-in configuration engine, and you get those benefits. And actually what we're going to do in the future is and I have a slide later that has more bullets, but we are going to add to that set of capabilities, so to enhance that. And so the other side of the coin is if you're a Chef user and you want to take advantage of the RightScale automation, then you can start with the Chef client server template, which allows you to connect to your Chef infrastructure and automate using that. And going forward, I will present a new feature called the RightScale Connector to Chef, which will allow you to do a deeper integration with your existing Chef infrastructure. So Chef for RightScale users, and we call this RightScale Chef. And we have to make that distinction because RightScale Chef is not backed by a Chef server. So all the functionality that the Chef language has, which leverage a Chef server, is not available directly. You have to use a RightScale equivalent for those. So things like data bags, search, you have to use tags, you have to use inputs, and the RightScale construct that map to those Chef abstractions. So the way to use this today is you go in the RightScale dashboard and you tell RightScale where your cookbooks are. And you can point to a Git repository, you can point to an SVN repository, or you can point to a tarball. And RightScale is going to go and download those cookbooks, analyze them, ingest them, and then also replicate them across in a distributed system called repose. Once you've done that, once you've added those repositories to RightScale, you create what we call RopoPath. And the RopoPath is basically a group of repositories that you put together and that you stack to tell Chef what cookbook to pick from what repository first. So if that two repositories have the same cookbook, then Chef knows which one to use. So once you have created that RopoPath, you can then attach it to a server template. And once you've done that, you can use all the recipes that are in the cookbooks in those repositories to define that server template. And so RightScale, because we went and scraped, we call that scraping, we scraped that repository, we analyzed the cookbooks, and we can tell all the recipes that are in the cookbook. You can then use those to create those server templates. So you can create a boot sequence where you can say, here are the 20 recipes I want to run when that server template, when the server using that server template boots. You can also define the operational scripts, which will be our recipes, which will be available when the server is running, and you can also define the decommission recipes, so recipes that will run when the server is terminated. And once you've done that, so once you have your server template using your recipes from your cookbooks, you can publish it and you can have people import it. So you can, and it can be private or that can be public, right? So you can actually publish your server template in the marketplace for everybody to import, or you can share it with another RightScale account if you have an organization and you need to share those assets. So once you've done that, you have a server template and you're ready to go, you actually launch a server. And at that point, what happens is our agent running on that server called RightLink will download the cookbooks from repose that they were replicated in repose in the previous step. And then we configure Chef to run those recipes. And there's a few things it does. Basically, it takes all the inputs that you set in the dashboard and merges that into the Chef node, right? So that all the inputs are now available for the recipes to run. And the second thing it does is it enhances the available Chef resources to add the RightScale specific constructs. So you can write recipes that will query RightScale tags, for example. And you can write recipes that will find servers, locate servers by tag. So if you have a good agent and you tag all your application server with role equals application server, then you can write a recipe that says, find all my application servers and run this recipe on them. All of that is available at runtime while running recipes. Now, in the future, what we want to do, there are a few things. Maybe the most important differences going forward is that we want to try and get rid of the RopoPath construct and instead let you attach cookbooks directly to server template. So it's a lot more like actually Chef server works. So the idea is that you will explicitly say, I want the server template to use cookbook A, cookbook B, and cookbook C instead of inferring from the RopoPath. And what that lets you do is actually solve those conflicts at design time. By conflict, I mean if two cookbooks have the same name, for example, you'll be able to pick at design time which cookbook to use, and they won't have to belong to the same repository, right? So it's much more dynamic, much more flexible. You can pick and choose cookbooks and then say, I want to use a recipe from this cookbook here and then a recipe from that cookbook there, and it's very specific. And that allows us, RightScale, to do a few interesting things. Like we can, for example, now show you the content of the recipe that's going to run because we know which one is going to run statically. We don't have to actually execute to know which one is going to run. So it's a kind of a bigger change in how we're going to integrate with Chef, and that should have very interesting benefits both to us to build our new server templates, but also to you. So the future. So no RopoPath, we just went over that. We also want to make it possible for you to publish cookbooks directly. Today, you can publish a server template that has cookbooks, and anybody that imports that server template also gets those cookbooks. We want to make that a bit more direct, and you can say, give just a cookbook and say, publish this, and then people can import a cookbook directly. The other thing we want to add, and that's a big ask from customers, is the ability to attach run lists to server template. Run lists are equivalent to Chef roles. So the idea is that you'll be able to say those 10 recipes, they should run sequentially, and I should be able to run them whenever I want. So, or it should run when I boot, or they should run when the server decommissions. And so you'll be able to define those run lists and attach them to server templates at the same places where today you can attach either a RightScript or a recipe. So instead of a single recipe, you'll be able to put an entire run list there. And that way we can actually consume rows from cookbooks and represent them as run lists inside RightScale. The other thing we want to do is enable knife integration. So we want to make it possible for you to upload cookbooks to RightScale using the knife command line tool, which is the command line tool that most Chef users use all the time, and also be able to download those cookbooks from RightScale using that tool. And finally, I already went over that, but the ability to actually view cookbooks directly in a dashboard and all their components is something that we're also going to add. So all of those features enhance RightScale Chef. So to summarize the RightScale Chef experience, the first thing you do is at design time, you can use inputs, you can use server templates, you can use the MultiCloud Marketplace to design your the way your server should use Chef. At managed time, you can take advantage of the automation, of the tags, of the server collections, which is how you can find server by tag. And you can use the ability to run scripts and recipes remotely as well that RightScale platform provides. And all of that is completely integrated. It's part of the automation engine that comes with RightScale. You don't have to maintain any infrastructure to take advantage of that. It's all built in. And it's the same technology that we use to build our server templates. So you can be sure that it's going to be maintained and improved over time because we use it as well. So now the other side of the coin. If you're a Chef user, maybe at this point I should ask, how many of you are actually using Chef today? Okay, yep, a few of you. Okay, so if you're a Chef user and you want to take advantage of RightScale, using RightScale Chef may be a little bit cumbersome because you cannot use the native functionality of Chef that require a Chef server to work, things like search and data bag. So instead of those, you would have to change those recipes to use tags and remote recipes and server collections. Now, maybe you use Chef because you have to use Chef in another environment than just RightScale, and you don't want to go through the trouble of porting all that stuff, and you'd rather keep using Chef server or the Chef infrastructure to configure servers running in RightScale. So to do that, we will be introducing next week the Chef client server template. And what it allows you to do is boot a server in RightScale that's going to then connect to your Chef server and get configured through your Chef server. You'll be able to configure all the settings on your Chef server as inputs to that Chef client server. And you will also be able to customize it, meaning that if you want to take advantage of automation, then you can add all the alerts that you need to that server template so that once that server is booted, once it has been configured by Chef server, it sends monitoring back to RightScale, and RightScale can use that monitoring data to automate the server. And actually, just this week, Cary, one of the tech lead of the server template team, released his RightScale Knife plugin, which if you use Chef today and want to use RightScale, you should definitely take a look at. What this does is it allows you to launch servers using Knife. So I know a lot of Chef users like to use the command line for everything. They don't like to use dashboards. They don't like to use graphical interfaces. So this command line tool will allow you to actually launch servers from the command line, and kind of, it's a more familiar flow for people using Chef. So I mentioned before this Chef Server Connector, and the idea here is to kind of have a tighter integration with the Chef, with any pre-existing Chef infrastructure. One drawback of the Chef client-server template approach is that the server template is the Chef client-server template. It's not Apache, it's not MySQL, it's not the actual application that you want to run. And so some of the integration is lost with RightScale. So to alleviate that issue, what we will be doing is have this new feature that allows us to actually configure the Chef server before we launch the instance. And so the label here is a bit munched, but it says hosted Chef or of Chef server. So the idea is that when you launch a server through RightScale, RightScale is going to go use the Chef server APIs to configure it. So upload all the cookbooks, upload all the roles, all the attributes, and then your server template at that point will be a real server template, a MySQL server template, or an Apache server template. And it will run the recipes, the boot sequence, using that Chef server instead of using RightScale. Right? But once it's configured, then it sends its monitoring data to RightScale, and all the automation works the same way. Now, what's great about that is you get all the benefits of a fully integrated solution, but you get to use the Chef tools like search and data bags that you cannot use if you use the RightScale engine. So we think this is a fairly attractive solution that if you're a Chef organization should be very interesting to you. Okay. So just to summarize, if you're using Chef today, look out for this Chef client server template coming out next week. Look up the Cary's tool, the Knife plugin tool. Be aware that there's deeper integration in the works, so things are going to improve. And what that means is you can take advantage of the RightScale platform today without having to change anything about the process that you go through to produce those Chef cookbooks or write those Chef recipes. Any questions so far? Good. Okay, so to summarize, what we were trying to do is to make RightScale yours. Right? We want to make sure that whatever configuration engine you're used to or want to use, you can use that with RightScale. So up until now, it was mostly the native RightScale engine, which means RightScripts and the RightScale Chef. We are opening it up now with the Chef server connector to make it possible for you to use a Chef infrastructure directly to configure your servers managed by RightScale. And we really hope that it will help integrating RightScale into your process as things go forward. And I think that's actually about it. So any questions about either using RightScale? Yep.
Curious what you use for the integration testing. Test Kitchen or anything?
We use actually our own homegrown tool called VirtualMonkey. And what it does is it's a big matrix of different OSs, different clouds, and different applications. So it's like a cube. And so all those permutations are then automatically launched through our APIs. And we run some basic tests on the servers when they become operational, run a few operational scripts on them, all automated through our APIs, and then clean everything up afterwards, again, using our APIs. So it's kind of a homegrown tool. But some of the solutions that or some of the same principle that we use to build a tool are also available through this new CloudFlow product that Ryan was mentioning earlier. So if you're interested in doing that kind of testing, automation testing, I think you should maybe talk to Ryan and get into that private beta and see if you can leverage CloudFlow to do the same kind of thing.
Yeah, VirtualMonkey, the tool is built on Jenkins.
Jenkins.
So it uses Jenkins, and we use that to automate all the testing. And we are working to try and make that tool more available. Right now, it's kind of a developer tool, so things break frequently, and they got to go in and fix things and tweak things, and it's not very consumable, but we're planning on changing that. We want to make that tool available to anyone, because it really is quite powerful. If you look at the matrix, the 2,500 tests, I mean, it's like 50 vertical tests, and all the clouds go across. Multiple operating systems get tested, and you can just trigger it to run, pick a cloud, pick a set of tests, run everything, run this whole vertical on one cloud just for one operating system. It's really quite powerful. So we do want to make that available, but it's going to take us some time to really get it cleaned up, since it's kind of our tool that we use. It's not something we focus a lot of effort on trying to make it available.
Thanks.
Any other questions about what we're doing with Chef, or where we're going with Chef, or what we did with Chef and the value we got from it?
So did you imply Chef is your standard now instead of templates? Your templates methodology?
So, I mean, we use Chef with server templates. So what I was trying to show here is that you can actually use Chef recipes to create server templates. So in your boot sequence where you have RightScripts today, instead of RightScripts, you can plug in recipes, right, that come from, and then Chef will run those recipes. So it's really an integration. It's really both. It's not one or the other.
If you look at the capabilities of a server template, it's more than just Chef. With a server template, you can configure more than just the boot sequence and just what you want it to look like. You can configure all your monitoring and alerts and all those things. Part of that, you can manage all the images that the template uses. So it adds a little more value than just the Chef configuration. So we continue to use the server templates. And in fact, for those of you that are familiar with our server templates and have looked through them, you know that right now our operational recipes, which are the ones that allow us to do things like take backups or promote a slave database to a master, right now those are all run in Chef. But in the future, we'll be changing those, most likely, at least some of them, to use scripts. Because if you look at what an operational task is, it's really a set of do this, then do that, then do this, then do that. And again, that's not really where Chef excels. You can do that with Chef, but that's not really what it's intended for. So we're looking at actually taking some of those more procedural things and turning those back into scripts and saying, well, this really should be a script. This should really be something that just does this and doesn't need all the overhead of Chef associated with it. So I think it's really a mix, and we're trying to bring all those together in what we publish to really give you the full value of the RightScripts plus Chef recipes plus the server template as a whole. Other questions? Dan, I saw you put your hand up. Gotcha.
Thank you. I'm unclear about the scraping process of how we would be posting our own Chef recipes and how those are replicated to the RightScale servers. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure, yes. So, so what we do is we let you enter all the information that RightScale needs to go look into what's in your repository. So you enter all the credentials in RightScale, and then we will go and we will use Git, we will use SVN, or we will use just a curl client if it's a tarball, and download all the cookbooks and then analyze them. And what we do there is we look at the metadata, because that's where all the inputs information is defined. And once we do that, then we upload the content of those cookbooks into repose. And repose is a distributed caching layer that is replicated across all multiple clouds all over the world, so that whenever your instance boots, it can download the cookbooks from a location that's very close to it. And it's also highly reliable, right? So we have multiple. It's replicated so that if there's a failure somewhere, then your servers can still boot and configure themselves.
So the SVN, GIT, or
Yep.
HTTPS
Yep.
layer has
Yep.
to be available on the public internet with some basic authentication for the RightScale servers to
Yes.
be able to access those
That's right.
repositories. Is there any other creative possibilities besides making those available on the public internet?
I think the knife plugin integration is probably something that may be interesting to you. So once we have that, you'll be able to upload your cookbooks using knife. And so it won't be us pulling, it will be you pushing.
Yep.
So it's not there yet, but it's something we definitely want to do. Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Any plans to upgrade to a new version of Chef Solo in the Ruby runtime?
So Chef Solo, the latest images that we produced, I think, are Chef 10.
10.10?
10.10.
Do you know?
It's a very recent. If it's not the latest one, it's the one before. So it's a very recent version. We did update them in the latest round of images. In terms of Ruby runtime, the situation is a bit more tricky. And the problem is that we need to support multiple OSs, including Windows. And getting higher version of Ruby run on those OSs can be tricky. Now, I'm not sure why it shouldn't matter to you, though. Maybe I'm missing but you should be able to install Ruby, the Ruby version that you want for your system side by side, because what we do is we install everything in a sandbox. So everything, the Ruby that we use to run Chef is not in the path. Right, so you should be able to install your own Ruby, the version you need, and use that to configure your server.
Oh, thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? Yep.
So since we are talking about scaling, what about parallelizing this whole process? You know, you said you have 25-odd matrix and so on. Do you have a solution for that, or is it all sequential still?
In the testing?
Yeah.
The testing runs parallel. There are, in the virtual monkey, built into it are all kinds of options for how you want the test to run. So depends on the test and things. We do parallelize a lot of it. We also streamline it. So for example, if I have 5 tests that I want to run, I don't need to necessarily boot a server 5 times. I can boot a server 1 time, run this test, get the server back to a state where I can run the next test without having to decommission it and relaunch it again. So a lot of that logic is built into that. We found that depending on which clouds we're running at what times of day and things, that we can't just fire hose everything onto all the clouds at once. We generally have to limit. In some clouds, you have to maybe stagger a little bit how often you're launching, how many volumes you're attaching. I mean, a lot of these are also attaching volumes, taking snapshots. It's doing all the functionality that your server would do. So there's a lot of things built into the monkey, and our QA team is constantly learning and evolving the process that they use in terms of which clouds they run when and how they do that. So that's all built into that testing facility.
Are you productizing that?
Yes, eventually. We're working on it. It's not the highest priority right now, but we would like to productize that, yes. In fact, for those of you who find that interesting, please come see me. I'll give you my card, and we can get in touch so that when we're ready to beta that, we can let you guys know. Anything else about Chef and RightScale, or Chef in general, RightScale in general? Raphael's vacation in France? All right, well, thank you for attending. And again, what we really want to get across here was that using Chef in RightScale, there are a lot of options to do that, whether you're a RightScale user right now or a Chef user right now. And RightScale provides a lot of value on top of Chef, on top of just the configuration management itself. So we're looking forward to continuing the relationship with Chef and RightScale, and look forward to having you guys use it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hand in your surveys.